Misfit Rebels, A Tale of Rebel Special Ops. Chapter 1. Ashes on Morvax. The ash-flecked clouds of Morvax roiled in the atmosphere like dying embers of a galactic funeral pyre, veiling the surface in a blanket of sulphurous haze. The rebel U-wing dropped low and silent, its repulsor lifts cutting through the dense air like a blade through wet cloth. In the rear hold, 4 men stood together without speaking, each eye fixed on the red-lit ramp ahead. A tremor passed through the hull as the ship banked over a ravine. Volcanic cliffs rose like broken teeth beneath them. The air was thick with heat and the scent of chemical death. Arno Khan stood in the center of the team, helmet clipped to his belt, eyes locked on the mission tablet in his hand. His short, dark hair was damp with tension, and his jaw flexed as he reviewed the refinery layout for the 12th time. The refinery complex was tethered to an orbital fuel siphon by 6 kilometers of durasteel infrastructure, suspended like a dying star's umbilical cord over the burning moon. One way in, one way out. We land under the ridge, follow the gorge north, he said, not looking up. Access port Epsilon 7 should still be unmonitored, if the slicer got the codes right. If he didn't, rumbled a gravel voice from the back, we'll just knock louder. Ragor the Trandoshan adjusted his vibarax across his back. Stealth is for cowards. Benor the Sullustan snorted through fluted jowls as he powered up his wrist tool, spoken like a walking pair of boots. Ragor bared his teeth in a grin that wasn't one. You ever wonder why your species is mostly engineers and snacks? Because one of us has to clean up after you scaled throwbacks. Arlo didn't interrupt. Their banter, sharp-edged and sometimes venomous, was part of the rhythm now. He had seen them kill together, heard them laugh under fire. That was trust. Vessel leaned against the bulkhead near the rear hatch, twirling a stun grenade like a gambler with a chip. Human, lanky, with that eternal smirk of someone who'd survived far too many near deaths and learned all the wrong lessons. I don't know, fellas, he said. I think the lizard's got a point. If sneaking fails, screaming and explosions make great conversation starters. And you're volunteering to be the loudest? Arno asked without turning. Was that a compliment, boss? You really do care. The pilot's voice cracked over the comms. Touchdown in 90 seconds. We can't wait more than 3 minutes on extraction. You're on your own after that. The squad locked helmets into place and secured gear with quiet automatic motion. Arno's chest tightened as he sealed his suit. This wasn't just another op. He'd seen too many missions buried under optimism and poor planning. He'd made this one airtight, calculated every angle, reviewed every file. It had to work. Morvax wasn't just another refinery. It was a core node feeding hyperfuel directly to Imperial star destroyers patrolling the coreward trade spine. Taking it out wouldn't just send a message. It would starve ships, stall convoys, and maybe, just maybe, give some outer system moons time to breathe. The ramp dropped, heat rushing in like an open furnace. They disembarked one by one into black stone terrain glittering with glassy dust. Lightning flashed across the horizon in silent arcs. Arno led, scanning the jagged landscape with his macro binoculars. The refinery was a silhouette in the haze, all brutal lines and vertical thrust, its tether vanishing into cloud above. They moved fast, boots crunching on ancient cooled lava, ducking behind scorched rocks and jagged crevices. The wind howled and the only voices were clipped murmurs through comms. When they paused beneath a jutting ridge, Bino set down his pack with a grunt and started configuring the slicer node. You know, he muttered, this isn't how I saw retirement. I thought you got fired? Viso quipped. Technical redundancy, after I fried a supply droid in a refueling bay, accidentally. You mean after you rigged it to blow while drunk? Arno added, kneeling beside him. Bino smirked. See? You do listen. Ragor paced the edge of the ridge like a restless predator. Too quiet. This outpost should have perimeter drones. Maybe they know we're here, said Vesor cheerfully, and they're just letting us get nice and cozy before the blasters start. Arno tapped his comm. Let's assume they don't. Move out. The access port loomed ahead, a service hatch flush with the base of the outer refinery column. Benno's slicer node crackled to life, spitting out sparks before locking green. The hatch hissed open with a slow grind. Ragor was first through, weapon drawn, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Inside, steam hissed from pipes. Heat pressed against them from every angle. Red warning lights bathed the corridor in pulsing gloom. Arno gave one final look outside, to the sky above, to the clouds swallowing the stars, and stepped inside. He didn't know it then, but this would be the last time they'd all walk into anything together. Chapter 2. 4 rebels, 1 cause. The inner maintenance corridors of Morvax's refinery were carved like arteries through the lifeless metal, pumping heat and tension through the group with every step. Conduits buzzed overhead, leaking sparks. The distant roar of turbines echoed like a beast growling from beneath the surface. This was an Imperial heart, efficient, brutal, and utterly without soul. The squad moved through narrow access tunnels lit only by red strips and flickering emergency bulbs. They moved in pairs, Vesso and Ragor leading, Arno and Benno following close. Arno checked the internal map on his datapad, his pulse in rhythm with the soft pings confirming their route. So far, no alarms. That was either good news or the worst kind. "Hey Benno," Vesso whispered through the comm. "How come your species gets the galaxy's biggest ears and still can't hear orders properly?" "That's rich from a guy who mistakes every escape plan for a dramatic entrance," Bennu replied without missing a step. "Remind me how many times you've crashed a stolen ship?" "3, Vesso said proudly. 4 if you count the one I landed upside down. Still You two want to get loud enough to attract a probe droid?" Arno cut in. "Or can the nostalgia wait until we're not 5 meters from a death sentence?" Ragor growled low and amused. "Let them chatter. It hides their fear." "Fear?" Vesso said. "We're walking through a giant Imperial bomb with claws and fangs behind every corner. That's not fear, that's basic survival instincts, with a side of sarcasm." Arno half smiled behind his helmet. The banter wasn't just for show, he knew that. Soldiers who talked like that under pressure didn't break when the lights went out. Still, the tension gnawed at him. He tapped Benno's shoulder and signaled a pause as they reached a junction with 3 tunnels spider-webbing off. They ducked into a maintenance niche, where thick pipes ran overhead. Arno deactivated his helmet comms and motioned the others to do the same. "We've got 5 minutes," he said. "While we're still breathing, talk to me. Any one of you feel like backing out, say it now." No one moved. Even Ragor just stared at him, unblinking. Arno hesitated, then spoke lower. "You all know I didn't ask for this op, but we were the only ones who could do it without sparking a full sector alert. Command thinks this strike can stall 3 destroyers for months. That buys people time. Real people." Benno leaned back against the bulkhead, folding his arms. "You think Command even knows our names?" "No," Arno said. "But I do." "I'll settle for that," Benno muttered. Ragor snorted. "I was promised fire and blood. I find both, I stay. Simple math." "You're not doing this for the rebellion?" Besso asked, genuinely curious. "I owe no one anything, but I have kills left in me and this place is full of prey." "You're a real poet, Scaly," Benno said. "And what about you, Vesso?" Arno asked. "You've walked away from worse ops than this." Besso shrugged, half smiling. "You remember that Zygerian cell we liberated on Ord Mantell? One of them, a kid, maybe 11, stuck a metal flower into my hand. Didn't say a word, just smiled. Didn't even know who we were, she thought we were heroes." "And you want to be one?" Arno asked. "No," Besso said, gaze darkening. "I just don't want her to be wrong." They fell silent. Around them, the refinery throbbed like a living creature, pulsing with heat and automation. Arno finally reactivated his helmet and nodded. "Then let's get moving. Target point is sub-reactor junction 6. That gets us access to the fuel regulators. From there, we split. Vesso, you draw fire up top. Benno, you handle the core sabotage. Ragor and I will secure the reactor chamber. We move quiet, but if things go loud... They will, Benno muttered. We adapt. They moved again, deeper into the metal maw of Morvax. As they rounded another corner, Arno's mind flicked to the first time he met each of them. Benno, ragged and bleeding in a burned-out hangar, holding a broken tool like a blaster, refusing to die while trying to disable a fuel pump meant to incinerate a village. Vesso, caught mid-heist stealing explosives from a rebel cache, talking his way out of execution by offering to join instead. Ragor, bruised and silent in a holding cell on Teth, who agreed to fight for the rebellion only if they gave him targets worth killing, and himself, Arno Khan, once a silent, obedient boy in an Imperial youth barracks on Coruscant, eyes hollowed by propaganda and purpose, until the day his instructor punished a friend to death for hesitating to fire on civilians. That was the first time Arno ever ran. And he never stopped. These men weren't born to fight. They were built in the cracks of oppression, forged from different wreckage and dragged together by a cause bigger than their pain. They weren't a unit. They were a scar stitched into the shape of resistance. And tonight that scar was going to bleed all over Morvax. Chapter 3. Entry Wounds. The corridor beyond the junction angled down into the refinery's outer underbelly, where the air grew thicker with heat and the scent of scorched circuitry and coolant. The narrow shaft echoed with the hum of buried reactors, and above it all, the steady vibration of the orbital tether, ever present like the thrum of a war drum pulsing through the steel bones of the station. Arno Khan took point, scanning ahead with a low-light visor. His team followed in silence, shadows against the dim red glow of maintenance lights. Ragor's footfalls were heavier, more deliberate. Benno walked with a practiced economy of motion, always a half-step behind Vesu, who moved with casual confidence. Too casual, Arno thought. But that was Vesu's armor. He needed to laugh so he didn't remember why he was here. They slipped past a section of inactive droid storage, hulking silhouettes behind Dua glass, silent and lifeless, but Arno kept his blaster drawn just the same. "This place is sleeping," Vezel muttered, eyes darting. "That bother anyone else?" "Means less screams," Ragor said. "Be grateful." "Means someone's lazy," Benno added, "and in Imperial facilities that usually means a trap." Arno raised a hand and the group froze. A thin beam of blue light arced across the passage just ahead. Motion trip. Likely connected to a turret or alarm. Bennu stepped forward, fingers already moving with his toolkit. The Sullustan crouched beside the emitter, traced the source panel behind a coolant pipe and hissed. Older design, not standard Imperial, probably installed by a third-party contractor. Sloppy work, exposed data port. I can fry it. Quickly, Arno urged. Benno patched a bypass node into the panel. Sparks jumped. For a second, Arno imagined the hallway flooding with blaster fire, imagined his team crumpling one by one, visions he hadn't earned but that came anyway. But then the beam snapped off with a faint pop, and Benno stood, brushing dust from his chest. "Still got it." "For now," Besso muttered. "You didn't forget Ord Valis, did you? You overloaded the capacitor," Benno said, insulted. "I saved us by cooking half your face. Still prettier than yours." "Quiet," Benno said. "We're coming up on the bypath." The shaft narrowed into a vertical access vent, a storm grate sealed the top. They climbed one by one, Ragor last, hauling himself up like a predator scaling a cliff. Inside the chamber beyond, the temperature rose sharply. No alarms, but warning strobes flickered on machinery panels. They had entered the refinery's thermal balancing array, a wide chamber lined with coolant columns and magma conduits feeding geothermal energy into the hyperfuel processors. Arno crouched behind a junction box and peered over the top. A pair of stormtroopers guarded a small data terminal beside the main conduit control. They were casual, bored maybe, but they were armed. Arno tapped his comm once and gestured. Ragor signaled back, lifting one claw and pointing to himself. Arno nodded. He and Ragor moved left. Besso and Benno went right. On Arno's mark, Ragor surged forward with impossible speed for his size. His clawed hand wrapped around the nearest trooper's helmet and smashed it into the wall. The second had barely turned when Besso slammed his forearm into the soldier's neck and buried a blade into the weak point of his armor. Two bodies dropped without a sound. "Clean," Arno said. "Check the terminal." Benno moved in, already linking his pad to the data port. "Good news?" he said. "We're in the right place." "Bad news. They've locked the internal reactor doors with a 4-layered encryption." "Can you crack it?" Arno asked. "Eventually." "We don't have eventually." "Then tell command to invent faster Sullustans." "You want me to ask nicely?" Besser offered. "Because I've got a great voice for radio." "Then radio your mother, because she's probably still wondering why you're not a mechanic like your cousin." Arno ignored them and crouched beside Benno, eyeing the blinking readouts. "What if we reroute the coolant overflow into the subcore, force a thermal drop, could cause a localized breach, trigger a soft reset?" Benno blinked. That's not bad. Who taught you fuel logic?" "I used to sweep floors in an Imperial training center. You pick things up." "You picked up subcore sabotage theory while mopping. Also how to fake engine malfunctions with a banana," Arno said. Benno chuckled. "Fine, I'll work faster." Arno stood and looked out over the facility. Vents spewed steam into shafts above. The smell of scorched plasma filled the air. They were close now. Every second past this point would push them closer to detection. "We'll need a distraction soon," Arno said, loud enough to clear the upper decks. "That's me, isn't it?" Vesso grinned. "Always is." "Not yet," Arno said. "One more junction, then you run your mouth." Ragor leaned against a coolant pipe, talons twitching. "I do not like this place," he muttered. "Smells like fear." "Probably mine," Vesso said. "Don't worry, it's just nerves." "That or the ration bars." "I meant Imperial fear," Ragor corrected. "This station is quiet because they're afraid to be here. Something deeper runs under this metal." Arno frowned. He'd heard similar things from other operatives who'd worked hyperfuel stations, strange accidents, vanishing workers, a creeping paranoia. The Empire didn't care if its men died, it cared only about the output. "Whatever's down here," he said, "won't matter after we're done. If we're done," Benno added. "We have to be," Arno said. "We have to be." He touched the comm and gave the signal. They moved again, into the throat of the beast, where sparks hissed and steel groaned, and the path ahead glowed with the fire of 1,000 ignitions waiting to burn. Chapter 4. Fire beneath steel. The air changed again as they entered the lower levels, thicker, heavier, laced with the tang of raw hyperfuel and scorched circuitry. The tunnel curved into a vast chamber ringed by cylindrical turbines that hummed with lethal promise. Steam hissed through grated vents in rhythmic blasts, and massive plasma coils glowed like the hearts of captive stars. This was the thermal convergence bay, the final conduit before the main refinery chamber. The facility's lifeblood flowed through it. If they planted the charges here, the entire hyperfuel network would burn like the core of a dying sun. Arno scanned the area. "No guards?" "No need," Benno muttered, eyes glinting beneath his helmet. "Anyone stupid enough to be in this room without clearance ends up vaporized by the coolant flush." "Comforting," Vesso said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Warmth and death in every breath." "It's like visiting Nar Shaddaa in summer," Ragor growled. "Enough jokes. Where's the target?" Benno moved to a central control panel, fingers dancing across a layered interface in a language not meant for Sullustan eyes. "Over there," he said, pointing toward a cluster of fusion regulators on a bridge suspended over the molten pit. "We reroute the pressure valves here, spike the core temp to critical, and boom, the whole thing tears itself apart in about 15 minutes. "And we're far away by then?" Arno asked. "In theory." "Comforting," Vesso repeated. Arno nodded. Split up. Benno and I will plant the charge rig. Vesso, map out an exit vector. Rigor, cover us from the gantry. Rigor growled agreement and moved to the perimeter, his silhouette massive against the orange glare of the fuel core. The team separated, and Arno moved with Benno along the narrow walkway, heat shimmering around them. Every step felt like it came too late. Arno's thoughts drifted back. Training halls, fire drills, the scream of engines at dawn on Corellia. He remembered the first time he'd seen an Imperial destroyer fill the sky, remembered the feeling of awe, curdling into resentment. That awe had been weaponized. That resentment had become purpose. You know, Benno said quietly, eyes never leaving the panel, my father used to work on one of these. Hyperfuel? No, cooling cores. He used to say everything in the galaxy runs too hot. Ships, people, empires. He was right. Died on one. The Empire blamed operator error. My mom never got a body, just a crate of his tools and a signed letter. Is that why you joined? No, I joined to make sure someone else's mom got to hate someone besides me. Arno didn't reply. The weight in Benyo's voice didn't need comment. It just needed someone to hear it. The Sullustan finished his wiring and gave a thumbs up. Pressure spike will take 2 minutes to register. Reactor failsafe might kick in, but if we hit the fuel vein in time, the override won't matter. What if it doesn't? Then we die like heroes or fools. Maybe both. Ragor's voice crackled over comms. Movement, top-level catwalk. Arno's heart kicked. How many? 3. No, 5 officers. Vesso's voice came next. And guess who just walked into the wrong break room? Looks like I get my moment after all. Vesso, wait! But the comms cut. A second later, a muffled blast shook the gantry. Fire rolled across the top chamber, and alarms began to scream. Red strobes blinked to life. Did it? Benos said softly. He really did it. We need to move. Ragor, we're coming to you. Hold position. Arno grabbed Benno by the arm and dragged him back from the bridge as the heat intensified. The charge ticked down inside the core, and the floor began to tremble with rising pressure. Blaster fire erupted above them, Ragor roaring in defiance. Go! He snarled. I'll cover. We're not leaving you, Arno shouted. Not yet. Fool, this is what we came for. Arno watched through a haze of smoke as the Trandoshan leapt from the gantry into a swarm of black-armoured troopers. His vibro-axe sang with each swing, cleaving armour, crushing helmets. He fought like a monster out of legend, and Arno knew Ragor was never going to leave this place. Benno pulled Arno backward, coughing. We have to go, now! They ran. Behind them, the sound of battle blurred into the rising thunder of a dying machine. They reached the emergency shaft and forced open the hatch. Arno looked back one last time and saw the silhouette of Ragor standing amid flame and smoke, axe raised, roaring into the void. Then the blast doors sealed shut. The tunnel shook. Warning sirens shrieked. The refinery core was overloading. They climbed, the heat chasing them like a living thing. Smoke filled the shaft, and the light grew blood red. One by one, the sparks of the void began to fade. All that remained was Arno, climbing toward the surface, alone. Chapter 5. The Fool's Diversion. Arno stumbled into the upper ventilation corridor as the shaft behind him belched heat and pressure like the lungs of a dying god. Benno clapped beside him, coughing, his tool pack scorched and leaking plasma. The ceiling above them shook. Somewhere in the levels below, fire was devouring the heart of the refinery. He held them, Benno rasped, looking back. He actually held them. He gave us the time, Arno said flatly, pressing his back to the wall, hand gripping the detonator like a lifeline. His breath came in sharp gasps, armor blackened with soot. We make it count. They were above the primary junctions now, near the refinery's control towers. If they could reach the comm relay, They could signal exfil before the whole installation tore itself apart. That had always been the plan. Plant charges, cause overload, escape in the chaos. Simple. Except, simple didn't account for friends dying in fire, for the growing weight in Arno's chest every time someone didn't respond on comms. He tapped his earpiece. "Veso, do you copy?" Static. Nothing. Then, "Hey, Khan, you still kicking?" Arno's heart surged. "Where are you?" "Upper offices, East Sector. Had to make a little noise, got some company." "Are you hit?" "Couple of scrapes, lost a lot of style points. Pretty sure I ruined this uniform's resale value." Arno looked at Benno, who was already on his feet, tracking the signal on his wristpad. "We can reach him," he said, "but we have to hurry." "This whole place is about to cook," Benno said. "We don't have time for heroics. He gave us a chance, we give it back." They ran through the upper catwalks, lights strobing overhead as klaxons wailed in every direction. The world was turning red. Steam hissed from burst pipes and distant screams echoed through comms. Imperials trying to evacuate. The refinery's spine was breaking. They found Veso slumped behind a shattered console, 3 bodies sprawled around him. His left arm hung limp, blood seeping through his sleeve, but he grinned when he saw them. "Took your sweet time. You look like hell," Benno said. "Yeah, well, they hit hard. Guess I insulted their uniforms." Arno pulled Veso up. "We're getting out. Exfil at the blast shelter, west side. That's still operational. It better be." They moved again, staggering through buckling corridors, doors warped, flames licked from cracks in the floor. The hyperfuel overload had begun its final descent into chaos, and then Benno stopped, just short of the final bulkhead. His eyes locked on a control panel beside the western conduit. "There's a backup safety cycle," he said. "Failsafe locked deep in the grid. The overload won't trigger unless this is burned." "How long?" Arno asked. "Minute, maybe 2, but someone has to stay to hold it." Arno shook his head. "We all go." "If we all go, this was for nothing. Veso won't make it far, you know it." "This is it, Arno. You lead the fire team, you tell the story. That's always been your job. Mine was building things. Tonight, I get to break something instead." He smiled, lips trembling. "Feels right." Veso tried to speak, but Benno cut him off with a gesture. "Don't say it. You'll ruin the moment." And then he pressed his hand to the panel, linked his datapad, and gave them one last look. "Now go. Before I change my mind and start crying like a fuel tech." Arno didn't argue. He slung Veso over his shoulder and ran. The hallway behind them lit in a white pulse. Benno's voice came over the comm, quiet, final. "Make it matter." Then, silence. Outside, the surface trembled as the refinery collapsed in on itself. Fire erupted in vertical sheets through the orbital tether, breaking apart the station's spine. The blast lit the skies above Morvax, and for a few seconds, the volcanic moon burned brighter than the stars. Arno watched it from a ridge kilometers away, Veso unconscious beside him. The wind carried ash and memory. His hands trembled. The detonator lay on the ground beside him, spent, useless. He picked up a small, scorched data chip from his pack. The recordings, their voices, their mission logs, the last things they left behind. He activated the chip. "This is Fireteam Dagger," he said softly. "We were never heroes. We were just sparks in the void. But sometimes, that's enough to light a fire." Chapter 6. Echoes in the Flame. Dawn never truly came on Morvax. The sky was a permanent curtain of ash and ember, pierced only by the angry glow of molten rivers and distant flashes of volcanic storms. But as Arno sat beneath the jagged ridge overlooking what remained of the refinery, a sickly light did stretch across the landscape, painting the jagged earth with shades of orange and grief. The fires below had begun to fade, Smoke spiraled into the sky where the Imperial refinery had once stood, a monument to control now reduced to twisted steel and cratered ruin. Veso lay nearby, wrapped in a thermal cloak, unconscious but breathing. His wound had stabilized, though Arno knew the damage ran deeper. Shock, blood loss, the weight of what they'd done, what they'd lost. The explosion had been everything Beno predicted. The backup safety protocols hadn't slowed the chain reaction once he'd overridden them. Fuel lines ruptured across every sector, incinerating storage silos and rupturing the reactor core. The orbital tether collapsed, dragging chunks of its scaffolding down into the moon's crust, where it was consumed by fire. There would be no recovering the station, no repairing what had been broken, and the message was sent loud and clear across the stars. The Empire had lost control of Morvax. Arno stood and activated the encrypted beacon hidden in his gauntlet. The signal burst into the void like a whisper across a battlefield. "This is fireteam Dagger," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the tremble behind his words. "Mission complete. Refinery destroyed. Survivors, 1 confirmed, 1 critical. Requesting evac." A pause, then he added, "Others did not make it." He waited a moment, listening for a reply that didn't come. The rebellion's comm grid in this sector was patchy at best. But he repeated the message once more and then turned off the transmitter to save power. There was nothing more he could do for now. He returned to Veso's side and sat, his gaze drifting out over the ashen plains. In the stillness, he opened the data chip and began recording. "This is Arno Khan, recording memorial log. For Raggor, son of the silent marshes of Dosha, you were loud, brutal, and often wrong, but you stood when no one else would. You faced death like a challenge, not a fear. And you died buying us time." He paused, swallowing the knot in his throat. "For Beno Ul," he continued, "engineer, cynic, reluctant hero, you saw the galaxy for what it was and still gave yourself to make it better. I'll never forget the look on your face when the circuit caught, like a man finally winning an argument with fate." His eyes burned. "For Veso, if you wake up and hear this, know that our lions say we saved you, but you saved us, old friend. Every time you made us laugh, every time you stepped up when nobody asked, you held us together. If this is the end, I hope you find peace. Maybe even a sabacc table in the stars." The wind howled across the ridge, stirring soot and silence. Arno's voice dropped to a whisper. "And for myself, I don't know. I never wanted this. I didn't want to lead. I didn't want to be the one left standing. But someone has to remember. Someone has to carry the names." The data chip blinked as it saved the log. Arno tucked it into his chest plate and looked up at the sky. A faint glimmer blinked among the clouds, distant, fast-moving. A ship, maybe. Evac on the way. Or just another freighter crossing a forgotten system. He didn't care, not anymore. He lay back beside Veso and closed his eyes. He dreamed of lights flickering in dark tunnels, of Raggor's laugh, deep and coarse, of Beno's sighs as he rebuilt a detonator for the 5th time, of Veso singing an off-key melody from Corellia's forgotten coastlines. Sparks in the void, that's all they were. And yet, together, they'd lit a fire even the Empire couldn't extinguish, a fire that would burn in memory, in whispers, in legends passed through rebel channels and quiet cantinas for years to come. They weren't heroes, they were rebels, and they made it matter. Chapter 7. Ghosts of Morvax. The extraction ship came at dusk, or at least what passed for dusk on a moon where the sun never truly pierced the choking haze. It was a battered GR-75 medium transport, its hull scorched from past engagements, with the telltale rebel insignia half hidden beneath carbon scoring. It dropped through the low atmosphere like a reluctant angel, engines whining in protest, guided by the beacon Arno had activated nearly 12 hours prior. When the side hatch opened and the boarding ramp descended into the soot-streaked clearing, Arno was already there, standing with Vesso's unconscious form supported on his shoulder like a burden too sacred to fall. 2 medics and a grizzled comms officer rushed out. "You calm?" she asked, her voice clipped. "Yeah," Arno rasped. 2 survivors, mission complete. "We picked up your log. That refinery's gone. Orbital debris still falling into the western ridge." She eyed the smoking horizon. Never seen that much fire from a moon. Neither did they. The medics took Vesso gently, placing him on a gurney, as Arno climbed aboard behind them. He didn't look back. The interior of the ship was dim, humming with old engines and fresh purpose. The medbay was small, 4 cots, 2 droids, not much else. Arno sat beside Vesso as the Sullustan medic adjusted his vitals. "He'll live," she said quietly. "Fractured arm, plasma burns, internal bruising. Tough bastard." "Yeah," Arno said. "That's him." As the medics worked, the cons officer returned with a portable console. "Command wants a debrief." "Now?" Arno asked, voice ragged. "I haven't slept since before the drop." "Orders?" He nodded slowly. "Okay." She handed him the console and he activated the feed. A flickering hologram of General Syndulla formed, worn, tired, but sharp-eyed. "Sergeant Khan," she said, "we received your report. I won't insult you with praise. You know what you did. The strike on Morvax was a turning point. You've crippled Imperial fuel supply lines across 3 sectors. We've confirmed the loss of the orbital tether and full facility meltdown. No survivors on their end." Nono didn't respond immediately. He stared at the display until she added softly, "We also received the memorial log." "Your fireteam—" "They were more than that," Arno interrupted. "They were brothers, friends. They gave everything. We'll honor them. Their names will be added to the archives. If you'd like, we can arrange a service." "No," Arno said. "They wouldn't want that. Just let them be remembered where it matters. In the field, on missions that count." Syndulla nodded. "Understood." Her voice softened. "And you, Sergeant? What do you want?" Arno looked down at his soot-caked hands. He thought of Ragor's final roar, Benor's last smile, Vesso's bleeding grin. "I want the Empire to feel what we felt," he said quietly. "I want them to look over their shoulder and wonder when we're coming." "We will," Syndulla replied. "Rest now. The war's not done, and we need survivors like you." The feed blinked out. Arno sat in silence beside the sleeping Vesso. Somewhere deep in the ship, he heard the hyperdrive spool to life. They were leaving Morvax behind, leaving the ashes, the ghosts, the heat. But not the memories, never the memories. Later, in the quiet hume of the darkened corridor outside the medbay, Arno found a quiet corner and slid to the floor. He pulled out the data chip again, the one containing their mission logs, their banter, their voices frozen in time. He played a short clip, just 5 seconds, of Ragor arguing with Benno over whether coolant systems were real weapons. Then he smiled for the first time since the fire. "You bastards," he whispered. "You made me believe again." He pressed the chip to his forehead, a soldier's salute, and whispered into the darkness. "We were sparks in the void, but look what we burned." Chapter 8. The Silent Sector. They re-entered the galaxy not with fanfare, but silence. The GR-75 emerged from hyperspace into the Vargan Drift, a cold pocket of space nestled between 2 minor trade routes, thick with nebular gases and sensor scatter. The rebellion used it as a staging zone, a graveyard of derelict freighters and cobbled-together command hubs, orbiting a forgotten dwarf planet. It wasn't on any Imperial chart. It was exactly the kind of place Arno Khan now belonged. As the ship docked with an orbital platform made from the skeleton of an old acclimator, no honor guard waited, no parade of grateful generals, just a mechanic waving them into a hangar thick with oil vapor and ion smoke, and the soft murmur of tired voices doing the quiet work of rebellion. Vesso remained unconscious, monitored by med droids, his vitals steady, Arno walked off the ramp alone, breathing in the stale air like it carried ghosts. He passed crates marked with fake trade symbols, walked by other fighters, Rhodians, humans, Twi'leks, all people with stories like his. None of them looked twice at him. Here, everyone had lost someone. Here, memory was a shared language. He was met at the edge of the hangar by a man in a captain's jacket, older, hair greying, face sharp from too many failures. "You Khan?" he asked. Arno nodded. "Debrief's been logged, you're cleared for rotation. You can stay here for now or get reassigned. I heard about Morvax. Rough op." "It was," Arno replied. "Heard you're all that's left of Dagger." Arno's jaw tightened. "One of two." "Yeah?" the man said, glancing toward the medbay hatch. "That's something." He handed Arno a small data rod. "When you're ready, Command's uploaded possible reassignments. Or you can stay ghosted a while. No pressure." Arno accepted it, but didn't respond. He made his way toward the upper levels of the station, found a supply closet that had been repurposed yet, and claimed it. It was barely big enough for a bunk and a wall console. It would do. For now. He sat for hours, watching encrypted news feeds from the mid-rim, reports of refinery outages, of ships stranded for lack of fuel, civilian chatter spreading rumors about the ghosts of Morvax, a fireteam that struck from the shadows and vanished like myth. The rebellion didn't confirm or deny the tale, and that made it stronger. Benno would have liked that. Let the legend grow. Days passed in routine. He trained in the station's hollow bond gymnasium, rebuilt his gear, checked Vesso's vitals, read the names of fallen rebels on the data wall. Some he knew, most he didn't. The war churned on. In the silence he listened again to the logs, Ragor's gravel-throated insults, Benno's muttering over broken circuits, Vesso humming Corellian drinking songs. He played them not to grieve but to remember. Then, one morning, he found Vesso sitting upright in the medbay, staring out a tiny viewport with a faint smirk on his scarred face. "Hey, boss," he said, voice raw. "Told you I was hard to kill." Arno let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Welcome back." "Did we win?" Vesso asked. Arno nodded. "We burned them down." "Did Benno?" "Yeah," Arno said. He made it count. Vesso closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, there was something harder there, etched into the corners. "We get to keep going, huh?" "That's the curse," Arno said softly. "We survive." "Then let's make it hurt." Arno smiled. "Yeah, let's make it hurt." That night, Arno uploaded the final version of the Dagger fireteam log to the Rebellion's encrypted archive. No ceremony, no flourish. Just a single line of code marking their mission, their sacrifice, and a short message that read, "Sparks in the void, remember us when the stars burn." And across the fractured galaxy, in whispers and stolen comms, the tale of Fireteam Dagger spread, not as a tragedy, but as a promise. The Empire may rule the stars, but the fire of rebellion burns in the dark, always. Chapter 9. Burning Trails. Time within the rebellion was not marked by calendars or seasons, but by the rhythm of raids, missions, and evasions. Arno Khan found that in the wake of Morvax, everything slowed and sped up at once. His body healed faster than his mind. Vesso, though scarred and a little more cynical than before, began walking again after only 2 weeks. They didn't speak much during those days, not because there wasn't anything to say, but because they already knew. Some truths didn't need repeating. Eventually the assignments came. Arno refused a leadership role at first. He couldn't imagine commanding anyone else. Fireteam Dagger had been more than comrades. They had been family, forged in war. Leading strangers into battle felt like betraying that bond, but command didn't let ghosts sit idle. Arno was reassigned under a rotating Spec Ops detachment, tasked with scouting Imperial supply routes and intercepting sensitive cargo before it reached Fortress Worlds. It wasn't glamorous, but it heard the Empire in all the right places. His call sign became known in whispers, Torchbearer, and among outer cell commanders the name began to carry weight. He led with precision, with pain, and with memory. Never recklessness. That was the lesson Rhaegor had given him. Bravery was nothing without discipline. Meanwhile, Vesso took on the role of comms infiltration and slicer ops. His near-death experience at Morvax had sharpened his edge, turned his charm into venom when needed. He could still talk a Gamorrean into giving up his ration pack, but now there was a steel behind his words. He wore Benno's old toolkit on his belt, patched and scorched. When Arnaud asked why, Vesso just said, "It reminds me to think twice before I do something stupid, or at least think once." The rebellion pressed on. Arnaud's squad hit an Imperial logistics base on Valtor, stealing prototype stealth armor. They disrupted a command relay on Ord Talor. On Vanek Prime, he blew apart a turbolift shaft and dropped a whole platoon of stormtroopers into a crater. But none of it hit as hard as what happened on Ulixar Station. That was the first time since Morvax that he saw an entire fireteam wiped out in real time. 5 men and women gone in a single thermal blast. Their screams cut short as the hallway caved in behind them. Arnaud barely escaped. The loss didn't hit him that night or the next. But a few days later, staring at a holo of their mission map, he realized he couldn't remember one of their names. Just a call sign, and that terrified him. The memory of Fireteam Dagar had become his compass, his anchor. If those names faded, so did his reason for continuing. He started a ritual. After each mission, he would record a small memorial, just a few lines, for every person lost. He kept the recordings on encrypted chips, storing them in a lockbox beside his bunk. Vesso called it morbid. Arnaud called it necessary. The war shifted. Whispers of a new battle station circulated, a weapon capable of annihilating whole planets. The Alliance High Command was fracturing over how to respond. Some wanted retreat, others wanted a bold strike. Arnaud kept his opinions to himself. He had learnt by now that wars weren't won by great speeches or heroic last stands. They were won in silence, in the burn of fuel lines, in quiet corridors where one man pulled a trigger and changed the course of a system. During one of their rare quiet nights, Arnaud and Vesso sat on the edge of a maintenance platform, drinking stale café from metal tins. Below them, rebel fighters zipped through docking lanes, prepping for the next strike. "You ever think we'll get a real ending?" Vesso asked. "Like not a fiery explosion or slow, bleeding death, just peace?" Arnaud looked up at the stars. "No," he said, "but I think we'll make an ending that means something." "That's enough." Vesso chuckled. "Still the poet. You're just mad, mine has better punctuation." "Fair." A few minutes passed. "You ever think about starting another fire team?" Vesso asked, not looking at him. Arnaud didn't respond immediately. He thought about Benno's grin, Rhaegor's snarl, the sound of Vesso's laughter echoing off Morvax stone. "Yeah," Arnaud finally said, "but only if it burns just as bright." Chapter 10. The Torchbearer. There was a saying in the rebellion, "You don't pass the torch, you light your soul with it and run until you can't anymore." Arnaud Khan never truly understood it until the final mission that took him deep into the Hydran wastes, a region stripped of civilization, haunted by the husks of failed colonies and roving warlords who claimed to fight the Empire but only replaced it with fear of a different name. His assignment was surgical. Disrupt an Imperial remnant fleet fueling at a hidden depot, now reinforced by defectors and black market tech. Not a major command operation, just Arnaud, Vesso, and 3 newer recruits, none with more than a year's experience in the field. He didn't call them a fire team, not at first, didn't give them a name, didn't joke or bond the way he had with Benno, Rhaegor, and Vesso back in the early days. It felt disloyal, like painting over the mural of memory. But as the mission dragged on, over 4 days of stealth, close calls, and tight comm silence, he saw flashes of that old fire. Tenno, a brash Duros scout, reminded him of Ragor's love for kinetic solutions. Mara, a quiet-focused Mirialan sniper, had Benno's knack for dry, cutting commentary. Even Kren, the fresh-faced comms tech, had Benno's grin. They didn't know the ghosts they were filling, they just showed up and followed his lead. And when the moment came, when alarms blared and the depot flooded with TIE patrols and stormtroopers, Arno didn't hesitate. He led the charge. They moved like sparks cutting through the dark, blasters roaring, explosives set with precision. Mara picked off gunners through the mists, one eye on Arno at all times. Tenno blew open a wall with too much gusto, and Kren hacked the fuel grid with hands shaking too hard, but it worked. It all worked. The depot collapsed under fire and steel, and the remnant fleet was caught with empty tanks and crippled logistics. A blow not just to firepower, but morale, a reminder that the rebellion still had claws. As they sprinted toward extraction, Mara slowed and turned to Arno. "What now?" she asked. Arno glanced at the burning depot, the crumbling bulk of a star destroyer crashing into the canyon below. "We light the next fire," he said. Back at base, Command released a statement on the mission's success. Syndulla herself commended it in a closed-channel broadcast. But none of that mattered to Arno. What mattered was when Kren came up to him afterward and asked quietly, "What were they like, the ones before us?" Arno paused. Loud, broken, brave. They argued over food and made jokes in the middle of firefights. One snored, one cursed too much, one never trusted orders, but they were good, better than they knew. "I'd like to hear more," Kren said. Arno nodded slowly. "You will, one day." That night, Arno unlocked the memorial box and added 3 new names to the fireteam log, not because they had died, but because they had stepped into the line of memory. Tenno, Mara, Kren. He didn't call them replacements, he called them successors, sparks catching on old coals. In time, Fireteam Dagger became more than a name. It became a whisper passed between rebel operatives, a sigil etched into the back wall of hidden bases, a call sign invoked when the odds were lowest. No one knew who the original 4 were, only that their mission burned an Imperial refinery down to glass and turned a dead moon into a rallying cry. And Arno? He carried the torch until the very end, until the final war's last battle, when the Emperor fell and the galaxy held its breath. He never became a general, never took a desk. He remained in the field, even when his bones ached and his trigger finger trembled. Because that's what the fire demanded. One night, decades after Morvax, an old soldier stood on a barren ridge watching the stars. Behind him, a new Republic outpost buzzed with young recruits, bright-owned and half-aware of the blood that paved their way. Arno placed a small chip in the ground, beside a weathered helmet scorched by age and time. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The torch had been passed, and the void would never be dark again.